Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Happy Greek Independence Day to one and all. And that's the end of our good news for today. We have a lot of bad news, a lot of crazy news. They kind of intertwine on at least a couple of these stories that we're going to do today. We'll be talking about the bankruptcy filing of 23andMe and people freaking out about what happens to their data now. We'll also be taking a look at a closer than it needs to be or should be special House race down in Florida. But as you might have suspected, if you've followed the news over the last 24 hours, we are leading off with the Signal Houthis Atlantic story that dominated social media and a lot of other news over the last day or so. And so basically what happened here, Jim, as you well know, is that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, no friend of Trump world, was somehow added to a Signal group chat about the final commentary before striking the Houthis, which was one of our good martinis not that long ago. He was invited to the group by National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. We assume by mistake. A little more clarity on that would certainly be welcome. The White House and others have confirmed the authenticity of this group chat. And basically they were going over, are we sure we want to do this? Everybody except J.D. Vance was a yes. He says, only 3% of U.S. commerce comes through the Red Sea, so 40% of Europe's does, so why are we bailing them out again? But ultimately, he bowed to the majority and the president's wishes on this, we should point out. And so some people are focusing on that. Other people are focusing on, from the pro-Trump side, oh, wow, this was a very mature conversation, which you can argue that it was. The bigger issue is, why was this conversation? And if Goldberg is to believe, other messages that he did not relay in the story that were more sensitive in terms of information about timing and strikes and all that stuff, done over Signal rather than in a SCIF or other secure communications. And I think that is the biggest story here. So Mike Waltz is probably sweating a little bit and maybe some others involved here. So Jim, you understand the national security world better than I do. So what jumps out to you here and how big of a deal is this?
Well, I suppose I should begin with pointing out that it was our National Review's Kayla Barch who put out a theory that strikes me as really plausible, that Waltz meant to include U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer in the Signal chat. In Signal, you generally come up by your initials. It's a JG. And boy, there but for the grace of God go I, as another JG who could have been... I think I can assure everyone I am not in Mike Waltz's phone. At least I don't think I am. That would make him more. So what it probably was he's, either Hegseth or Waltz is putting this together. And he just, clicks on a JG thinking it's Greer and instead it's Goldberg. Really deeply disappointing on multiple levels. First of all, Signal is not secure enough for talking about classified information. It is among the more secure apps that you can use. Though just a couple months ago, I believe it was Google's cyber threat team said that Signal had been hacked and was accessible by Russian hackers and those affiliated with the Russian state. I know people think that I am putting Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, on Adam Gase levels of disdain, but hey, Greg, guess where Steve Witkoff was at the time of this thread chat going on?
I'm going to say in Russia or Ukraine, probably Russia.
Moscow. So now, do we know that the Russians have hacked into this? We don't, but Signal is not a secure enough system to discuss classified information. What I'm fascinated by this morning is there are a bunch of people who are saying, well, this shows you why Mike Waltz has to get fired, which are usually very different people who are saying, this shows you why Pete Hegseth has to be fired. I don't no, here's the thing. Waltz set up the chat. Waltz added Goldberg. And as far as we know, this is an accident. I suppose you could speculate on whether someone wanted this information to get out, but I don't think there's any evidence pointing in that direction. And then Hegseth discussed things that was indisputably classified. I know he was yesterday in Hawaii and was doing this, saying no war plans were texted to each other. I think we're getting a very Bill Clintonian definition of war plans because it's the when and the where the U.S. is going to strike, which strikes me as just about the most classified thing you could possibly have. The other thing which is bothersome, so Goldberg wrote that on Monday morning, he contacted everybody on the chain through their emails, not through the chain, and said, is this an authentic chain? I think he kind of knew, but he wanted to get confirmation. 2 hours later, National Security Council spokesman said, this appears to be authentic. Trump was at the White House event with Governor Landry of Louisiana around 2 p.m. He was asked about it and said, this is the first I'm hearing of it. And as much as I sometimes doubt the president's honesty, there's no reason to think that he was lying about that. This certainly looked honest. I'm really bothered by the fact that nobody on the text chain reached out to the president and said, Mr. President, we have a problem. And we really screwed up. I think if you're the president of the United States, your staff owes it to you to tell you about these screw-ups so you can get in front of them rather than letting you learn from the media. And I'm really disappointed in Hegseth and Waltz and really everybody on that chain over that. It also does not help, in addition to these two kind of earlier mistakes. On the chain, Hegseth is bragging about their operational security. And that just looks really bad. And then finally, the fourth really bad problem in this is that just a couple of days ago, Tulsi Gabbard posted on X, quote, any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. Any authorized release? Because it looks like we've got one here. And no, it being inadvertent doesn't get you off the hook. You can get imprisoned up for 10 years. Now, this is not all that different from Hillary Clinton having classified information in her emails on an insecure server. And among the people who were ripping Hillary Clinton a new one, entirely deservedly so, were Pete Hegseth and Mike Waltz. This is not holding them up to some ludicrous, unrealistic standard that I'm imposing. This is holding them to their standard that they said they were going to uphold and that they lambasted their predecessors for not living up to. They ripped into Joe Biden for having classified information in his garage. Like, well, then you can't talk about all this stuff on Signal. And it's really disturbing that Hegseth's response was to go out and attack Goldberg. The National Security Council had already said this was true. And Trump's first reaction is, for the Atlantic, it's a failing man. None of that matters. None of that is like what you had here is something that's flat out illegal. And, at minimum, I kind of wish these guys had offered their resignations to the president. Trump doesn't have to take them. But I'd like to see somebody say, I made a terrible mistake. I should not have done this. Mr. President, I regret the error and I accept the consequences. And as far as we can tell, we've seen none of that. We've seen this is all Goldberg's fault. This is all the media hyping stuff, all this kind of stuff. It is deflect. It is defend. There's nobody taking responsibility. And judging from Trump's comments yesterday, I mean, the question of whether a president who had a whole bunch of stuff at Mar-a-Lago is going to hold, he's not going to fire anybody he likes over mishandling classified information. But he acted like it was no big deal yesterday. And this is a big deal. And I think that it is really frustrating in light of everything these guys have said. They went into this job saying there was a new day, new page. They were going to do better. They're not doing better. And it's extraordinarily frustrating. Oh, by the way, just the last couple of days, I laid out today's Morning Jolt, a whole bunch of low-level functionaries have been prosecuted for mishandling classified information. It's a big deal if nobody's heard of your name, but if you're famous, you get out of jail free. Like you said, Hegseth in Hawaii on his way to Asia was talking about how, Jeffrey Goldberg had gotten intertwined in some of the hoaxes, whether it's Russia collusion or the suckers and losers that are buried from World War I over in France or what have you. The problem here, though, is that, as you said, and as I mentioned in the intro, this has been confirmed by the National Security Council and other parts of our government. So what he's saying here, there doesn't seem to be any good reason to dispute it. Yes, he's got a checkered past in jumping onto some of these other issues, but nobody's disputing now that this actually happened, that it was legitimate, and this was the way they communicated. Ari Fleischer he tweeted out yesterday, yes, skiff-like communications and secure channels can be clunky when everybody's traveling, but you still got to figure out how to do it in a way that is more secure and where that information is preserved. And so that was not done to the extent that it should have. So much better care needs to be happening in the future. Well, let's talk about one other thing that's good news today, and that's that we're sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, if it's time for you to talk over the issues in your life with a professional therapist, BetterHelp is the way to do it. And you can also save some money while you're doing that, because traditional therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save an average of $50 per session. And with BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, which saves you big on cost and on time. And what's more, these therapists won't talk about your problems on Signal because it's not secure. With more than 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people all around the world. It's convenient, too. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy schedule. And you can switch therapists at any time. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/3ML to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp,
HELP.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our second bad martini now. And we just explained how Mike Waltz's week is not off to the greatest start. But our second martini is tangentially related to that because his seat in Florida's 6th Congressional District, which is going to be up for a special election a week from today, is closer than it needs to be. Much closer, unfortunately, based on mail balloting as well as early voting. Now, of course, Republicans are more likely to show up on Election Day than Democrats. But Michael Prusser, who is with Decision Desk HQ, tweeting out yesterday, in Florida 6, Republican Randy Fine has found himself in a rather precarious position. The weekend did not provide much separation from absentee mail turnout, and Democrat Josh Weil likely expanded his current lead if votes were counted today. Current turnout is Republicans plus 0.3. The expected final turnout is Republicans plus 14.1. By registration, Florida 6 is an R plus 24 district. Trump won it by 30.5% in 24, and we are not tracking for an electorate close to that. However, the weekdays ahead will improve Fine's position, and he should eke out a slight advantage going into Election Day. Fine is not a good candidate for the district, and the combination of poor Republican turnout and a modest persuasion shift is likely to produce a significant move leftward versus 2024. So, again, just due to the huge demographic advantage in this district, Randy Fine will probably win next Tuesday. But when you have a House margin that's this narrow, you can't risk a lot. And right now, Republicans are not shoving the ball into the end zone like they should here.
You know, I would really like on April 2nd or shortly thereafter when we chat to say, this was much ado about nothing. It was just that Republicans like to show up on Election Day. They don't like to vote early. Fundraising doesn't always matter. Kamala Harris raised a lot more money than the Trump campaign did. It didn't do her a lot of good. And that this was, nothing for us to worry about. I don't know how things are going to... Special elections, you never know what's going to happen. I do recall heading into the 2010 election, Republicans won a bunch of House seats that they don't usually win. I think we had a similar phenomenon in the 2014 midterm elections. I want to say Charles Ju in Hawaii, and Republicans do not usually win in Hawaii. It was a weird three-way race. And then I believe there was a Republican who won Anthony Weiner's seat up in New York City. And again, a heavily Democratic district, really weird set of circumstances, Republicans win. So sometimes special elections are leading indicators. Sometimes they're not. It wouldn't stun me if, look, these are generally in Florida, these two seats, both Waltz's and Gates's, are pretty Republican-leaning seats. You don't really have to worry about them too much if you're a Republican. Special election, much lower turnout. I could see Democrats being really fired up about this and caring about these, special House elections in a way that the typical Republican just isn't thinking about it. I think that explains the fundraising numbers. I do wonder if and it's possible the dynamics of the districts, there's just too many Republicans there. There's no point in getting too worried about this. I think my parents' district, the 1st District of South Carolina, I remember Colbert's sister was going to beat Mark Sanford, and some districts are just too many Republicans for Democrats to sneak one away. That said, this is really ominous, and I do think it's possible that Republicans are kind of laid back about this. They just had an election in November. They're not thinking about this too much, and maybe people are frustrated about the economy. Maybe they feel like Trump is talking about annexing Canada and stuff that doesn't really relate to their lives. Who knows? I do think if we lose this, it's going to be really frustrating. And when you couple this with our first martini, it's you'll sit there thinking, did Mike Waltz really need to be his national security advisor? We'll see how this shakes out. But if you're a Republican down there, maybe it's time to knock on some doors and make sure people know when that special election is. And maybe, if they don't think it's real, maybe we shouldn't schedule special elections for April Fool's Day.
That could be. Although, they pushed DeSantis hard for as early as possible. And I think April 1st was as early as possible, given all the layers of primaries and stuff that you have to do to hold the election. But, this is like the Democrats' first chance to rant at Trump through the ballot box, as opposed to lighting things on fire and shrieking on social media. And so, you see the Democrats every once in a while in their press releases saying, hey, we won a special state house election in somewhere. And you're like, okay, big deal. But in that state, it might be a big deal. This is their first chance to do it on the congressional level. And so they're going to be working as hard as they can, even in a district where the numbers are stacked against them.
Yeah, this would be a rattle in the engine, just because it's a seat Republicans should win. And it's one they should win pretty handily. And this, it's an indicator of that Mike Johnson needs every seat he can get. And this is one they never really thought they'd have to worry about. So hopefully this turns to be much ado about nothing, but not certain at this point.
Yeah, I do remember when Mike Pompeo was picked to be CIA director before he was Secretary of State, the Republicans barely held on to his Kansas seat. And that's not in the Kansas City suburbs. It's in a very conservative part of the state. And now they've held that seat easily ever since. But the Democratic intensity was there to almost win that one for the Democrats back in the day. So we'll see what happens in Florida 6 in about a week. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And there's all sorts of business news out there. One of the stories we've toyed with doing is DoorDash teaming with Klarna as to make your takeout payments stretch out over time in case you can't afford them, which is insane in itself. But now we've got 23andMe, the genetic testing company, filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and courting bidders, as NBC reports. The DNA data of millions of users is up for sale. 23andMe has been around since 2006 and has steadily amassed a database of people's fundamental genetic information under the promise of helping them understand their disposition to diseases and potentially connecting with relatives. But the company's bankruptcy filing Sunday means information is set to be sold, causing massive worry among privacy experts and advocates. And I can see why people would be upset. My less than compassionate response is, this is why you don't voluntarily send your DNA into random people to see what percentage you might be from a certain area or to find a long-lost 15th cousin or something, because you just don't know where your most personal data is going to end up. And for some people, I know it's more significant than that. If they're adopted, for example, or they just don't know a lot about their family history, it's more tempting to dig into that. And on some level, you certainly do feel for people who thought their data was being protected. So I think there's life lessons in there, and hopefully this is disposed of in a way that is good for the customers who have perhaps not made the best decisions.
Yeah, look, I don't begrudge anyone for wanting to know more about their ancestry, and it's been fascinating to see the people who find out, oh my goodness, I have somebody who found out they were 6% Korean, and they are as pallid as I am. You never would have guessed by looking at them. So there's, that curiosity, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. But from the very beginning of this kind of genetic testing, there's been this very uncomfortable question of like, okay, once you have that once you've got somebody's genetic code, who owns that? And you'd think, well, it's mine because it's me. It's literally what makes me me. And the attitude of these companies, well, actually, no, we own that. And we own this data. And we'll give it to you in this report, but we're going to keep it. We're going to hold on to it. And what we do with it, we don't know. Now, people may remember that I wrote a thriller novel a couple of years ago called Hunting for Horsemen. It was about genetically engineered viruses. In the research for doing that report, I found out that, whenever the president uses a drinking glass of any kind from at some public event, it is immediately removed and wiped down. They do not want the DNA of the president getting around out there. Why do they not want it? Because, as I lay out in that novel, heavily researched nonfiction, it's nonfiction fiction, you could say. Michael Crichton, I do the research. You can build a virus to target just that person and figure out exactly what that person's, weaknesses are in fighting off infections and things like that. And you could theoretically, you could, have a genetically engineered designer virus that kills someone. Looks like a really unlucky natural infection, and nobody knows who did it or how it got there. Now, the good news is, as the average American, nobody's probably going to target you specifically for your genes or something like that. But, oh, by the way, among that time there was an instruction to U.S., I believe in the Hillary Clinton years, to collect genetic information from North Korean representatives. I don't know what we were going to do with that information, but these seem, a little like things that make you say, I don't think we were engineering a terrible, deadly virus to wipe out the North Koreans, but I think clearly that information is valuable to somebody. And now, all of a sudden, if you had 23andMe, get your stuff deleted. Press whatever button that is on the website, put in the request. Again, is it a matter of somebody who's going to try to use this information to kill you? Probably not, but it is the sort of thing where now something that makes you, it's not yours anymore. It's floating around out there. God knows what kind of, malevolent person could want to do something with that information. So wonders of our era. I don't think we're necessarily on our way to a Gattaca-type future, although I got to admit the kind of retro 30s look would be very cool looking. I like that Art Deco stuff. But that's a high price to pay if everyone knows your genetics and knows everything about you before they meet you. Again, your genes are what make you, and you probably don't want them out there being traded and sold and commodified out there. So good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
Also, wipe down your glasses once you're done with them.
I don't know if this is theory or it's actually been concretely reported. Jim, you would know better than I would, that the Chinese were actually working on viruses to target specific DNA or other people, perhaps.
Their interest in it is been widely reported, shall we say. Now, there are a lot of people who argue that COVID-19 was that it hit Indian Americans, and I think some other group. I think RFK was saying it was targeting white people but protecting Jews or something like that. It was typical conspiracy theory stuff we've come to expect from him. COVID-19, there's no evidence that it was a genetically engineered bioweapon. It hit everybody. It affected the Chinese. It affected, every different group on the world. That having been said, the possibility that was part of some biological weapons research going on inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that is not a crazy theory. I wouldn't have enough proof for that, but clearly the Chinese are extremely secretive about that. They have had an interest in biological weapons. They've denied having a biological weapons research program for a long time. A lot of this stuff is what you call dual use, meaning the more you understand how a virus spreads, what makes it virulent, et cetera, the more you could then apply that information to making a virus more virulent, more dangerous, more contagious, things like that. So little is directly known about this, but considering everything else we know about the Chinese regime and its research capabilities and interests, it would not be surprising in the slightest if they were up with that stuff. Again, I don't know if this means, whether this means they're going to use 23andMe to go get you. I don't know. I don't think that's the case. But as Levi's would say, protect your genes, people.
Exactly right. And so,
in fact, you might even say that selling your data is a bad idea, genes.
Good Saturday Night Live reference there. Go read Hunting for Horsemen. This is directly on that topic. And 23andMe, if you could not sell it off to somebody who writes a check from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that would be great.
Maybe you want to take that whole database and just accidentally burn it. We lost all the data. Oh, phooey. Oh, well. That way, the only copies of that information is in the hands of the customers who you said you were going to serve in the first place. So,
again,
our standards are so high, Greg.
Yes. But circling back to the top, don't randomly send people your DNA. Anyway, Jim, have a great day. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Tuesday. Join us again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.